Ko materia turai.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I have a sense of deja vu about this legislation, which the National Party majority has supported back to this House with virtually no significant changes, despite overwhelming opposition from the submitters. I think only 4 of the 70-odd submitters supported this legislation. But only 4. All of the experts who have been involved in social policy development for the last 20 or 30 years all oppose this legislation, some going so far as to say it just should be thrown out. There wasn't even remedial. There was nothing you could do to make it fair or just or appropriate for the needs of sole parents in particular and their children. And before I continue with our concerns about the bill, I do want to acknowledge the work of the officials. It was a very difficult and fractious select committee because, of course, these issues are very significant. They're about whether or not we treat children and their families with respect. Officials have to pursue government policy, and if government policy is cruel and degrading, then they have no choice but to be part of the development of cruel and degrading legislation, which this bill is. Back in 1991, I was very active in the unemployed and beneficiaries movement, and I witnessed firsthand, and I personally suffered as a person on the dole, and then later as a sole parent with a small child on the benefit, the effects of both these twin attacks, the National Party's 1991 benefit cuts and the Employment Contracts Act, which came in the same time. Those measures heralded 10 very long years of low economic growth, high unemployment, downward pressure on real wages and employment conditions, and poverty, severe poverty, for anyone unfortunate enough to be on a benefit or a low income. And here we see the National Party, who's claiming to aspire to this closing the wage gap with Australia, but are doing exactly what actually the Australians have just said and confessed was a failed policy. By attacking workers' rights, by measures such as this bill, really the precise opposite will occur. This will not close the gap with Australia. It's going to make it much, much worse. Not only that, it will increase the gap between rich and poor in this country to an even further unacceptable level. And I do challenge the Minister to tell the House how forcing tens of thousands of beneficiaries, many of whom will have limited skills and marginal capacity to work because of their illness or their disability, or the fact that they are parents and want to be good parents and care for their children, into a labour market that cannot provide them with work. This bill will do nothing for those people. It's simply a matter of supply and demand. If there are more people competing for the same number of jobs, real wages for everyone will go down, not up. And if the trend of recent employment rates revealed today in the June Household Labour Force Survey continues, we are going to see even more people competing for fewer jobs, which will create even greater downward pressure on wages. So this bill is a driver of poverty. This bill is a driver of low wages. This bill is a driver of child neglect. That is what this legislation does under the Minister, Paula Bennett. It was policies such as these that were a large part of the cause of this wage gap with Australia blowing out under the last national government. But with this kind of bizarre back-to-the-future reasoning, they're now claiming that even though it failed and increased the wage gap in the 90s, that somehow it's going to close the wage gap now with exactly the same plan. But we know that this is ideologically faith-based legislation. There is no evidence that any measures in this bill will achieve the outcomes. It's faith-based legislation is what this is. There is no evidence that it will do anything. And in fact, and we'll have a look at the Australian example in a moment. So I do want to make the point, motherhood is a job. Motherhood is a job, and a highly valuable, significant job that is never given the credit that it deserves, that the women and the men, mothers and fathers who are sole parents, who are out there caring for and raising their children, are doing an incredible job. And what they do not need from anyone is the disrespect and disgraceful disregard that this legislation and this government is showing them. What they need is support to continue that most essential job of raising our children to be productive and happy citizens of this country. And that will only happen if they are treated like respected citizens of this country. This legislation does not do that. We do not agree in the Green Party with the work first ideology that says that any paid work, no matter how menial or at whatever lowly pay rates and conditions, is better than no paid work at all. And in fact, what we know is that there is significant contribution from those who are on benefits, who can't work because of the circumstances in which they are in, who make a huge contribution to volunteer labour in this country that adds enormous value to the services that provide support for people who need it. And that is being attacked in this legislation as well. The punitive approach in this bill, particularly for domestic purposes beneficiaries, coupled with the abolition of the training incentive allowance for tertiary education, risks parents being moved off benefits into low-paid, temporary or casual work. The result will be an increased labour market churn, which will be exacerbated by that 90-day fire-at-will extension, of course, which will make it even worse and more insecure for families who need a much more secure base. And the consequent, there will be significant negative implications for workforce productivity and also for wages. Parents are the best qualified to make decisions themselves about what is best for their children and how they should balance their childcare responsibility. Well, Paula Bennett laughs at the idea that actually parents are the ones who are best qualified to decide. So much for this whole nanny state accusation that was made by the national government. Paula Bennett doesn't think that parents are the best to decide. Paula Bennett says she's the best to decide. She knows what children need. She knows what solo parents should be doing. She knows what those children need in their childcare and how they should be raised. So she's going to force their parents out into work, knowing that if they can't find work and if their case manager is not supportive, then that beneficiary could lose half of their benefit. That beneficiary's children, she won't even support them into study, which in a recession is the most practical thing you can do for people who have low qualifications and a very poor job market with high unemployment. You support them into study. Not this minister. This minister will use punitive measures to attack their children and drive those families further into poverty, sir. There are significant welfare concerns, child welfare concerns, around children being left at home alone if a sole parent is forced against his or her better judgment to go out to work. Now, those risks to child welfare were identified in 2002 in the evaluation of the 1999 reforms in welfare. That was the last time we had work testing on sole parents. That evaluation in 2002 clearly showed that further research that there was an issue, there was a serious issue, and there needed to be further work done on that, on child welfare, if that program was to continue. But there has been no further research. So there is a very serious concern here, Mr. Speaker, that the government is undertaking these measures knowing that there is no evidence to show that they will achieve their objective and no evidence or work done to ensure that there will not be serious child welfare issues if sole parents are forced to go out to work. Leaving children, this is a form of child abuse. This is structural child abuse, in my view. What is going to happen with those families and those children? Now, the minister can frown and shake her head, but she knows as well as I do how difficult it is for sole parents to be able to take good care of their kids. And there are others here in this chamber too who understand very clearly what that life is like. The efforts that sole parents go into making sure they can raise their kids well and take care of them well, and when they need social support, they go to government and ask for social support, and they get it and they deserve it and they're entitled to it so that they can help raise their kids well. But this government will make that virtually impossible for those people. Virtually impossible for those people. So we know that this policy has failed in Australia, and in fact just this year Australia has relaxed its work testing regime for sole parents to make sure that part-time study and volunteer work are also part of the package for getting social assistance, not just paid work like this minister is imposing here. So not only is there no evidence that the proposals will work, but actually where similar proposals have been put into place, there is evidence that it's failed, and so everywhere else in the world is backtracking from it.